And the reason why it is important for us to grieve, I think it's highlighted in the next slide. The next slide. Okay, these are the myths. Maybe before we get to that, the myths, some of the myths that we really need, by the end of this presentation, to be over, that men don't cry, right? I think this has really destroyed our society in the sense that there is a lot of men that carry a lot of baggage, and because we are bound by this man code that we should not cry. And when I say cry, I don't mean the he and all the sounds. I'm talking loosely about that we must grieve. And then also that it gets better with time. I want to say that it is not necessarily true that it gets better with time. It only gets better with time if we are taking time to deal with it. Otherwise, if you just leave it and say it will get better with time, it will never get better. It can actually get worse. The other one is that the disease, you need to be strong. Because for you to be strong, first you need to be weak. If the Bible is correct, it says it is at our weakest point that we are made what? Strong. So therefore, you need to be weak before you are strong and you are able to get up again and start moving on with your life. Quickly, also, trauma generate emotions, and those emotions can remain stuck in our bodies and in our minds. And these can become an energy which we begin to express unconsciously. You're in a relationship and you're always snapping. You're in a relationship, you can't deal with certain issues. It is because of some grief or some trauma that you have not been able to deal with or process. And we hold emotions not in our heads only, but also in our bodies. You can become physically sick because of what? Of trauma that you have not dealt with. And then I said, in a grief-dismissing world, we are asked to grieve privately, quickly, and to medicate on that. This is very big. You're given 2 days off to go and bury someone that is very close to you. You come back, you have not really grieved. The only thing that now you're doing is to pop pills so that you can suppress that emotional pain. And that's the world that we're living in. And then the next slide. Let me say, even the Bible says, blessed are they that what? That mourn, for they shall be comforted. So there is a need for you to grieve so that you can be what? You can be comforted. And let me tell you something else, what openly grieving does. When you openly grieve, this is what it does. It gives the next person the permission to give you support. Did you get that? Yeah. Because honestly, last week I was speaking to a colleague who was saying that their neighbor lost someone and he doesn't know what to say or to do when he gets there. And I know that's the reality for many people. We don't know what to say, we don't know how to handle these things. And now, sometimes you're even afraid, I might say something and it's the wrong word. It's the wrong thing. How is this person feeling? So when you mourn or when you grieve, when you cry, you are giving us permission to come closer to you and support you. So that's why the Bible will then say, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. But when I act strong, I'm afraid to come to you, Mdala, and say, Mdala, all will be well. Because I'm taking Mdala back. Mdala is over that. But when I see that you are vulnerable, being vulnerable actually is an alarm to say, you know what, guys, I need help. And I'm reminded, I saw Isanda Mama. I'm reminded of one elder who in this church who lost their better half. And I remember at the funeral, everyone spoke, proudly of the elder. He was like, that elder was strong Because that elder, when we got there, he was the one who was what? Who was comforting us. And we praise such people. But what we didn't notice is that elder never gave himself time to what? To grieve. Later on, he almost had a nervous breakdown because he had issues that he had not what? Dealt with. And as Christians, we praise people that stand up on the funerals. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm just saying let's be careful that we don't encourage stand there and say, one day we are going to see her. Yes, one day we are going to see her, but the reality is that at the present moment, it is hurting you. It is hurting you, and you must allow yourself to go through that process. And that's my fear, is that sometimes as Christians, we can begin to inhibit a process. I like calling grief a God-given process of healing. And want people to act strong. But before we act strong, we must become vulnerable. You know that sometimes a death of a friend can hit you in a way that a death of a relative cannot. It can hit you and you don't understand why sometimes you react in a way that you are reacting. I want to thank God because you closed the swimming pool that was there. Because I get traumatized when I see a swimming pool. A schoolmate at 5 years, drowned at a river. Up to today, I don't go into a swimming pool. I don't play with water. And this is because, unfortunately, no one was there to guide me, to show me, no, the death is not caused necessarily by water. No, I bath. When I say water, yeah. To say it's not necessarily caused by the water, that's how you have to deal with these things. The people that you openly grieve to, obviously, is the people that are going to give you support. Because, like I said, is that openly grieving is you are giving people permission to come and assist you. So if you see that these people are not going to assist you, there is no need for you to even share your grief with them. But I don't want you to think a lot about that, because you have a bigger issue, which is your own grief. We live in a world where people will always be people, Have you ever noticed that if me and Ma'am are friends, right? Once she loses someone and I go there, there's this feeling like Nanyamsava.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
That's true. Yeah.
There's this veil, like it's like we are no longer friends. Every time I know, when I get to her, I know what to say. I know how to start the conversation. But on that day, there is a veil that is there, and that veil, especially in the era that we are living in, is even complicated, where people sometimes are not comfortable with talking about their issues. So I don't know how to break into that veil. But when she becomes vulnerable with me, then she's opening up the veil for me to what? To come in, and it's an invitation, right? And maybe on how long should I be strong? I think we are going to get to that when we talk about the stages. All right, now I'm going to talk about now 5 phases of grief. Now I think she has touched something that is very important about knowing the emotion, right? And I think these phases, more than anything else, they are emotional states. Ne? Usually psychologists call them 5 stages of grieving. Ne? I deliberately call them 5 phases. The reason why I call them 5 phases instead of stages is because if we say stages, in most people's mind is that I'm on stage 1, after that I go to stage 2, after that stage 3. But these phases, you can be on stage 3, the next thing you think I've passed stage 2, you are back again. So that's why I'm calling them the 5 phases of grief. All right, let's go to the next one. These are the phases. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Right? Denial, anger, bargaining, and acceptance. All right, now let's talk about the first one. Now, I remember I was 10 years old. Do you guys know what a stool is? A stool. It's I don't want to call it a chair because a chair has this thing to lean on. Ne? 10 years old, I was at my grandmother's homestead, right? I remember that night, I sat on the stool, right next to the door. I was the oldest boy there, so I felt like I was a man. Yeah. So when I was sitting there, there's light that starts coming in. It was raining on that day, and we see light like it's a car. And as a man of the house, I was supposed to stand up and go and check. But guess what? I remained sitting on that stool. And then my aunt comes in. And then when she comes in, she walks in. And all of a sudden, the atmosphere of the room has changed. And you could feel it. Those that have experienced when the news are being told, it's like the atmosphere changes immediately. Like there's something, you know. And she goes and she hugs my grandmother. After that, she begins to cry. And in their crying, I'm sitting there by that stool, I'm listening. And I'm wondering, 10 years old. And then the next thing, she mentions my mother's name. And they keep crying, and they stand up. They go and pack the bags. They're preparing to go to the city. That's where my mother was. And I remember the whole process took about an hour. And I remained sitting on that stool. I never moved an inch. And I never shed a tear. And listen to me. The reason why I never shed a tear, this is what is happening in my mind, 10 years old. I am thinking that if I cry and shed a tear, that will be accepting that my mother is gone. Do you see the thinking? So I'm not going to cry. Because if I cry, I am saying that I am crying because my mother is dead, but I am denying. Are you following me? I am denying that my mother is gone. Days passed, I never shed a tear. Years passed, I never shed a tear. I remember even when I was growing up at high school, there's one thing that I could never say out of my mouth, was that my mother died. If you ask me about my mother, I'll avoid that question. Or I'll create an imaginary mother. I could never bring myself to say that my mother is dead. I used to have dreams about her, as if she's still alive. And this stage is called what? Denial. Most of the time, it's a reaction to shock. Now, if it lasts for hours, it's fine, right? Because that's the way that you're trying to cushion yourself from these heavy news. But if it lasts for years, it becomes dangerous because you have not moved on. A lot of aspects in your lives, if I have time, I'll speak about that, will be affected because you have refused to what? To move on. So most of the times when people say, next slide, when people say things like, it can't be, they're in shock. They're not saying that it is impossible for their loved one to die. They're just what? In shock. Sometimes, I've seen people where you will tell them that so-and-so has passed. They will stand up, go into the kitchen, and start washing dishes. Like they're trying to block it. The mind is saying, it's too much. I cannot take this. So they go into a what? Into a denial mode. It's good for a while because it acts as a protective what? Mechanism to the brain, because the brain cannot handle that trauma all at once. Let me tell you something. There are people that could actually prepare their own husband's funeral while they are still on denial. Yeah, abanye they go crazy. Yeah. So this is emotion that people sometimes express. So now you need to be you especially when it comes to dealing with those emotions. And I'm going to say this is a blanket term for all the emotions. Most of the times, don't try and address the emotion. Don't try. When they are on denial, it's not time for you to prove that, no, your mother is actually dead. It's not that they are not intellectually aware of that. They cannot handle it. So this is where it comes in, which we must be observant. I think someone said something that is very powerful, and I also recommend it in my book. Sometimes, bazalwane, it's important, it's important to go to a funeral and sit there and just be quiet. It's important. Because sometimes you want to, she's still trying to deal with this denial. You say, no, ushonile for sure simbonile tina sambilela. That's not what the issue is. The issue is they are trying to tell you that this is too much for me to what? To handle. I can't handle it. And sometimes if we don't listen careful, we'll miss what they're trying to tell us. And we'll address the wrong what? The wrong problems. The problem is not the intellectual, they're not saying that their mother is immortal, they cannot die. When they say it's impossible, they are saying, I can't handle this. It's too much for me. That's the cry that you must hear. It's too much for me. I can't handle it. And as time goes on, with your assistance, without you trying to prove that they are really dead, without producing a death certificate, without producing photos, they begin to process that information in bits and pieces, until they come to realize that this has actually happened. So that's how we can deal with this. And when I was listening to today's presentation, I was thinking in my mind, this could actually be a tool that we could use as a church, because I wanted to talk about this on the third point, but I'm going to throw it in right now. Bazalwane, when you are invited, this is not time to evangelistic efforts. Stop it, Bazalwane. Stop it. Stop going there trying to teach them the doctrine. They are dead. That's not the time. Where were you? Why didn't you teach them when there was time? You are there to show compassion. That's what you are there to do. So, and how do you show compassion? You spoke about these things in the morning. By listening to where they are and going to their point of need and helping them through that. Not stopping them. Stop being angry. We'll talk about that anger. That's one emotion that we always want to stop. Stop being angry. Grief, bazalwane, let me say this. Grief is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. What has just happened is not normal. Dala, you said it very well. Mfundis, you said it very well. Don't expect me to act normal. This is not normal. It's not every day that I lose a mother. This is a once-in-a-time event. So let me be. And that's one thing that we can actually be equipped and begin to make differences in people that have lost their loved ones by being there rather than pushing our own agendas, to actually support them and understand which emotion are they battling with. Are they battling? Are they bargaining? Are they in denial? Are they depressed? Is this the beginning of acceptance? All those, it's important for us to do that. Denial is also a reaction of what? Of shock. So at first, he acts as if It's normal. Because he's trying to block that out. You know, you're trying, mentally, it's too much for you. So you try and what? And block it, you know. So if it hits you all at once, you know, one writer says that one thing about grief is that we only survive grief because it is given to us in small dosages. You know, and I think only God is the one that does that. You know, he knows. You know, because if everything was to come all at once, all of us will go crazy. All of us. So it is God who is helping us to say, you know what, let's deal with this, let's deal with this, let's deal with this, let's deal with this, you know. And at the end, you are able to process it in a way that ongakhona ukukopha ngayo. And I believe that siyainotice i-reaction kalo bhuti because it became so big. Okunye ukuhlanya kwethu, sorry to use this word, okunye ukuhlanya kwethu akukho that out there, but kuba lama moments okufika khona sisibuza ukuthi kanti umzalwane sometimes suke ku10 kanti umzalwane zikhona izinto ezinye njani adila nazo or angadilanga njani nazo. So it's easy to notice it when it's now at big scale, but all of us, you know, react differently on different situations. For example, my mother was traveling to my grandmother's place before. She had said she was going to come on the day when I got the news that she passed away. So every time when, now it's a bit better, but what used to happen is that every time when someone was going to travel the following day, I would not be able to sleep. I'll be worried. And me, I only started noticing that later on in my life, because so these things will be in your what? Subconscious. You don't know why why sometimes umntwana ends something that looks innocent, but to you it triggers something. You shout at the child, it's something that has been what? Has been triggered. Okay. The next one, I noted you, and the next one is anger. It's anger. And this anger, bazalwane, is directed to different people. It's directed at yourself. You are angry at yourself. And the reason sometimes why we're angry at ourselves is because sometimes we have got this delusion that we could have done something about someone's death. Sometimes we elevate ourselves to this godly position. You know, I remember my uncle called me one time and he was like, your grandmother is not well. And I hadn't gone home for a long time, you know, and my grandmother was now complaining because she wanted to see me, you know. And then my uncle says that you are making your grandmother to be what? To be sick because of your absence. Ne? And a few days after that, my grandmother passed away. I still had not gone. I was angry at myself. And I thought, if only, and listen, let me tell you something, Bazalwane. Avoid being judges when people are going through grief. Because it's a process. This is what they are dealing with. It's easy for you to come to me and say, come on, you're not God. Even if you had gone there, if God wanted him, and you're even making it worse, God wanted my grandmother. Why would God want my grandmother? Doesn't God have Moses and Enoch there? Now he wants you understand? And some of those things that we say about God, Bazalwane, they are the ones that make people to be angry at God. We stand there in people's funerals and say, God took him. And by that time, there are 5 orphans that depended on that man. And you're saying, God, what? So let's be careful, Bazalwane, when it comes to this. So you can become angry at yourself. Sometimes you can become angry at even the person that passed away, as if they had the power to hold their life, you know. Also coming from the things that we said, no, she gave up. But why would you give up if you've got children? What do you expect if my mother gives up and she leaves us? What does that say about her? Do you understand these innocent statements that we say, but we don't know what they are doing to the next person? So sometimes we are angry at them. We think that they have abandoned us. They have left us. Sometimes we are angry at the caregivers, the nurses. They suffer, these people. We feel they didn't do enough. Our nurses, why didn't they see this? The doctors, why didn't they see this? And one of the reasons why this happens is that because every time when someone passes away, we always want to find a reason or something to blame. And you know why we do that? We are worried about our own mortality. We are saying to ourselves, if someone can die and there is no explanation, it means that we can also die anytime. Yeah. So to try and console and comfort ourselves, we need to find something to blame. No, he died because the nurses did this. He died because so-and-so did this. So that we might cushion the fact that we can die also anytime. So most of these emotions, even to the grieving, they are not actually direct. Sometimes they are not directed to the one that is passed on. They are directed to our own selves. When we realize, he has passed away, it means that tomorrow also, if Umdala is as fresh as he is, and look at how skinny I am, I can die. You see? So these are the emotions that people are dealing with, that we need to also to handle with what? With care. But the last one, Bazalwane, it's God. We are angry at God. Now, I want to say that there is a good side and the bad side of being angry at God. The good side is that I always say that when we go to God and we are heartbroken, I think our God sometimes can tolerate our pettiness. But the fact that I go to God and say, God, why? I think I will get answers. But some of these things, they are coming from the fact that because we have made God the one that kills people. And we say, God has taken. God, no, he's now, at least you guys are Adventists. Other people will say, God needed, she was so good and God needed angels. At what expense did God need angels? So some of this anger is then generates from there. And our job sometimes as people that are comforting people, our job is not to go there and defend God. Right? Let people pour out their hearts to God. And in pouring out their heart with God, I believe that our God is a reasonable God. He will be able to what? To begin to address their issues at the right time. Everything, the Bible says, everything under the sun has got what? Season and what? Yeah. And time. This is one lesson that you learn when it comes to grief, that there is season. There are things that you can say there. There are things that you can say there. More than anything else, I believe that the process of comforting people, more than anything else, is about listening rather than talking. Talking scenario. It all happens for the good to them that loves the Lord. They come out easily off our tongues. But sometimes you need just to be quiet and listen to them and hope that the Holy Spirit will give you the words. It's not that what you are saying is not true, Bazalwane. The scriptures are right, but it's about the what? It's about the timing. Sometimes truth mistimed can be more harmful than what? Than helpful. And this is before we get to introducing Jesus Christ, we must first do what? Meet their needs. Their needs right now is that they're what? They are broken. They are broken. They are not looking for fundamental beliefs. They are looking for what? For comfort. Thank you. And you remind me of one time. I remember, I think it was 2018, if I'm not mistaken. We're coming from a camp meet, a youth camp. beautiful youth camp. We just came out from the campsite, and I think 5 minutes into the freeway, we saw our friend's car spinning, and we stopped, went back, and when we got there, one of our friends was already gone. Now, I remember we went back to the church, and when we got to the church, the pastor volunteered to counsel, to give us counseling. And if there's one thing, I want to be honest with you, if there's one thing that I was skeptical at first, because if there's one thing that I didn't want was somebody standing in front of me and telling me that God knows why he did that. And so the pastor calls us for that session, and I appreciate what the pastor did. And I remember we sat there, and all of us had one question. God, we're in a camp where you had invited us. God, we were praying there. It's not like we're going there for our own business. God, 5 minutes after that accident, we had just prayed for traveling mercies. And I remember how everyone vented out, and the pastor, throughout the whole session, never opened his mouth. And I realized after that, I walked out of that room feeling light. And I realized that all I needed was to vent. I'm going to what you're saying. Sometimes people just need to vent. And then when you come with your logical explanation, you are closing those venting spaces. And then now they have to keep it inside. So sometimes it's all about, if there's one thing that we can take from today, is that sometimes helping the grieving, sometimes it's just sitting there and being there. I like what somebody said about, I think it's you again, which sometimes it's you going there and cleaning the room. Help them with sometimes they need practical help in terms of preparing for Ilogzen more than anything else. Rather than you going there, sitting next to them, kumetras, and making things worse. Sometimes they just need to see that you are there, your physical presence. That's all that they need. And when the time is right, give them the platform to vent.